Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So I have one more game for you from today's tournament, or this round of tournaments. They played 5 rounds today. And I was able to do 4 videos, so that's pretty good. Usually I just get my one in and I'm done. But I have the Wesley versus Shakhriyar Mamedyarov game for you guys coming out around 5. So for all my people from the Philippines, magandang umaga. Masay akong makita kang muli. Maayong buntag for people that speak Cebuano. Kamusta higala. Kamusta kabagan. Appreciate you guys stopping by. For anybody that's coming from Azerbaijan or who does speak Azerbaijani, salam to you. Kh2 Appreciate you guys coming and stopping by. And always, anybody, if I speak your language, feel free to tweak what I say. If I don't quite say it correctly, let me know so I can say it a little bit better. I just want to sound as authentic as possible when I'm speaking people's languages. So yes, I appreciate all the the tweaking and the critique from you. But if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have for this game. All right, so we got C4, E5. We got G3, G6, knight to C3. All right, so what we have here is we have the English opening, and this is the King's English type of setup. There was another name that was given for it. It was like the Carl's Bremer, something like that. I'm not sure which one is 100% correct. I actually played this from the black side. I think that E5 is probably the best, if not one of the top best ways to deal with the English. Just kind of doing like a, I guess it'd be like a Dutch if you reverse the colors type situation. So we got bishop to G7, bishop G2, knight to F6. We have E4. Castles by black. We have knight G to E2 by white. C5, we have castles. Knight to C6, we have D3, D6. So we're looking almost similar. Of course, the major differences being these 2 knights right here. One is on F6 and one is on E2. Not too major of a change. So we see A3. It can get kind of annoying if you have A5 mixed with knight to B4. They can throw a little A4 action in there. So it becomes really, really hard to dislodge that knight. So we see A6, rook to B1. The intentions are pretty clear. We're going to be playing B4. We're going to try to open up this rook on this file. Make it as as strong as possible. So we see rook to B8. B4, pawn takes B4, pawn takes B4, B5. So as you can see, white and black have similar ideas. Pretty much all the way up until this point, with the only real difference, like I said, being the knight on E2 instead of on F3. So we see pawn takes B5, pawn takes B5, and then we see H3. So bishop comes to E6. Imagining at some point when this pawn is pushed, we're going to be able to nestle or ensconce that bishop right there on C4. So we have F4, pawn takes F4, pawn takes F4. And it kind of looks a little iffy, I'm not going to lie, as far as this king safety goes, because, there's not a whole lot protecting the king. So he's kind of on his own out there. So we see knight to E7. We got bishop to E3. And then we have D5. And D5 is actually the novelty of the game. I'm not sure, I can't remember what the move was that was seen before, but maybe queen C7? I don't know. But yes, D5 is a novelty of the game. So we see bishop to C5, doing a pretty good job of pinning this knight down to this rook. So we see rook to E8, just unpinning. The queen comes to E1. We see pawn takes E4, pawn takes E4, and then we have bishop to C4, and then queen to F2. So, looking at the situation, we're poised to, maybe possibly push F4. Start to get this king side open. White's king side is already, crazy open enough. So, you want to try to, open up black's king side, just depending on what black does. So right here we see knight to D7, and then we see rook F to D1. Like I said before in the previous video, you always want to put your heavy pieces opposite a queen. It just helps to pin the piece down, especially if you start getting these pawns rolling, popping a pawn right there, or even pushing here, popping the bishop here, you might could possibly win this knight. So it's always good. It's always nice to practice that. So the queen comes to c8, unpinning. So we see bishop to d6, and you're gonna see these bishops really come alive here because this bishop is on this diagonal, this bishop is on this diagonal. So as you can see, the rook doesn't have many places to go. It's kind of running out of squares there. So we move rook to a8, and I was thinking in this position we were gonna see like an e5 situation. But we do see knight to d4. Now we're adding a lot of pressure onto this pawn here that is only supported by this bishop. So, you know, you have a couple different things you can do. You can take on d4, which is what was done in the game. You know, or if you do try to hold on to it, which is not quite as strong, you know, you would see e5. And then now, like I said, there's a big question on this rook here in the corner. You know, what are you doing? So the rook would probably go to c8 and then rook b to c1. As you can see, you know, these white rooks are really, really nice on these open files. And so you're going to start to get some penetration going. You can even swing the rook back over, knock this queen, because the queen actually doesn't really have too many places to go at the moment. Only this square. So, you know, you need to be on the lookout anytime you start to see like a queen, you know, that's running out of squares. A lot of times you can trap the queen. So be on the lookout for that. Taking it back to what we saw in the game, like I said, we saw bishop takes d4 and then rook takes b4. We don't have to worry about any pins on this diagonal in this color because, you know, as black only has a light squared bishop, so we're good on that. So the rook comes to a3. We got rook to c1. So queen comes to a6. So as you can see, it's a very similar situation than what I showed you, but you know, it's just a kind of like a little bit of a switch in the way that they did the moves. So this is actually much stronger for black to do it this way. So the king comes to h2. We have rook to a1, forcing the issue. Now you're not forced to trade, but you know, you only have really two options: either move this rook down, protect it, or just trade. So we see that here, queen taking on a1. We have queen to g3. Queen comes to b2. We have rook down to d1. We have knight back to c8. We have bishop to c7. You know, so we've just discovered an attack on this knight. So the knight has to think of, you know, what is it going to do? Because as you can see, you know, bishop to c7 prevents the rook from coming here. So the knight has to move. So we see knight to f6. And this is the point in the game that I want you guys to go ahead and pause it real quick and see what white plays. It's a pretty strong move. And it definitely changes the game drastically and makes some pretty severe imbalances in the situation. So go ahead real quick and see. All right, cool. So a lot of you guys are probably thinking this queen right here is kind of holding on to this knight, right? But you actually have a really, really strong counter attack, and that is queen to g5. So if you found this move, you didn't let this knight being hanging, you know, cloud your judgment. And you also notice that black has their own hanging piece, and also you have the ability to bring this bishop back here, which is what happens in the game. It actually, like I said, it greatly imbalances the position. So we see queen takes c3. We have bishop to e5, you know, throwing a counterattack on this queen. So, you know, you have two options. You can try to counterattack like this maybe. And then after queen takes, you're threatening mate. So the rook is going to have to take here, but then you have rook to d8, and then you have rook to e8 covering, and then you have rook here, which is mate. So you don't really have that same defense. So we see bishop to e5, and then we see rook taking e5 here. And then we see queen taking f6. And this is also threatening the same thing as before, but it's also pinning this rook down. And there's not really a way for you to remove the rook. Ideally, you'd want to be a situation where, let's say, maybe, you know, you had like the king somewhere where you can place a check with the rook and discover an attack on the queen, but you don't have that here. So we see rook to d5, giving up the queen. Queen takes c3, rook takes d1, queen to e5, centralizing the queen, but we're also threatening, you know, queen e8 with check. So the knight comes to d6. We see f5, rook to d2, king to g3. We're sidestepping because if you see, if you continue with your attack up here, you're going to be seeing bishop to f1, and you're going to be losing your bishop, and you don't want to be losing pieces in this position. Because it is, you know, since black has a rook, they actually have quite a little bit of strength still going. So it's not beneficial for you to give up, you know, a piece here. So we see king to g3. Rook comes to d3 with check. We have king to h4. We have h6. You know, of course, in a dream world, we're going to be pushing this pawn here. So we see king to g4. King coming to h7. We see bishop to f3. King back to g8. We see h4. We see g5. G takes f5 with check. We see pawn takes f5. We see knight to f5. And this is laying a little trap. I'm curious how many of you guys see this here. If you take with the queen, you run into bishop to e6. And that's not pretty because now you're going to have to give up your queen for a bishop. And there's no way to protect this pawn. So don't fall for that. And then taking with the king just gives away, you know, your bishop. So, you know, that puts you kind of in a pickle. And the major problem in this position is the fact that you have this bishop tethered to this pawn. So now you have the ability to like always hold the bishop and just keep the rook protected. So you don't want that. So after knight came to f5, we saw queen to b8 with check. King coming back down to g7. Then we see queen to e5 with check. The king came to g8. And then we saw bishop to e4, which I guess looking back at it, this was something that could have been played initially. It might have been a time thing. That might have been why they kind of went and did this back and forth. But king to e5, queen to e5 with check, king to g8, bishop to e4. We see knight to e3 with check. King comes to f3. We see knight to b3, and then we see king up to f4. Knight comes down to d1. So you start to see it kind of getting unraveled here. So we see bishop to c2. And this was the same kind of idea that we had in the last game when that bishop came down here to b2. You know, it's forking these two pieces, so something's going to have to give. So the rook goes ahead and takes on b4. But then we see an in-between move, queen to d6, trying to see if we can snap off this rook. We see bishop to b3, so we are able to get the rook. And now the problem for black is the fact that, yeah, you're going to win the bishop here with bishop takes c2. But now you have two pieces that really, without the king's help, can't really defend each other very well. And so in this particular position, we see queen taking b5. But when I was following the game, queen to d2 looked extra juicy. Because I was like, man, just put that queen right next to both of the pieces, you know. But anyway, you know, there's a lot of things that are winning in this position. So queen takes b5 is definitely winning. So we see knight to f2. Queen to e2, forking the two pieces. The knight coming to d3. And this is with check, so now the king is forced to move. King coming to g3. And after the bishop comes to b1, we see queen to d1. And as you can see, there is no way now for this bishop to hold this knight. So you're going to have to move the bishop here. And then that is just lights out for the knight. And you have the possibility of coming up here like this. But yeah, it's going to be a done deal. Basically, the king is going to be able to come up here and in conjunction with the queen, are going to be able to, you know, scoop up this pawn. And once you get rid of this pawn, you can actually give away the queen. Depending on the situation, you can give away the queen. Let me see. What's another thing? Yeah, I guess it would be taking the bishop here. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, just win this pawn here, and then it gives you a pass pawn, and then you're able to, you know, get rid of this in an advantageous position, get rid of this, and then make it to this this queen and square over here for the pawn. That's roughly about how you win that. All right, cool. So that is that game, and so that was a nice game by Wesley. So he ended up today with 2 wins and 3 losses. So he did kind of go down today a little bit. So he definitely has his work cut out for him tomorrow. So I appreciate everybody coming and stopping by. I'll say Muraming Salamat Po, Aking Magay Kabagan, and Akong Magay Higala, and Kh2 Ra8 for all my people that speak Azerbaijani. And I will see you guys next time. I appreciate it.